halfway through this afternoon sessions, I'm happy to introduce to you Techsylvania, a woman in tech, who's going to shed light on what companies can learn from e-commerce in China. Sharon Guy, come closer to the stage, has a background in international management and is an expert in everything digital. Having collaborated with the agile Alibaba Group for half a decade, China's largest e-commerce platform, for those who don't know it, she's now in a position to give recommendations for building marketing strategies with AI support. Welcome her on stage, please. Join me.
Okay, so that was my bio. Sounds great every time someone else does it. This is, I guess, the China crew. Welcome, first of all. I definitely feel very welcomed here in Romania. Like many speakers, I guess, it's also my first time here. It's also my first time in the Balkans in general, and y'all are making a very good impression for me in my 2 days of currently sort of semi-sleeplessness as well. Oh, let's switch the waters. So we've heard a lot from Silicon Valley, speakers from Europe, but now let's take a trip to the other side of the world, which is China. And you'll notice that a lot of Chinese tech companies, brands, companies in general in China are not very vocal. I don't know why that is. Perhaps it's because of a Chinese cultural thing where a lot of people there are also a little quieter, a little less loud on the PR. We're not as boisterous as maybe the Americans are or American companies. And so that's why people like me come to conferences to tell more people about this part of the world and what they're doing over there. So I used to be the GM at Pattern, which is an e-commerce accelerator. I spent some time in Alibaba as well, which was a very interesting company. I did my first TEDx this January on something called the culture fluid mindset, which is not the topic of the talk today, but it is something that I think is very important. I definitely encourage you to check it out. And I wrote a book after working in China called Ecommerce Reimagined. It's available in all book channels. And I wrote it for a couple of reasons. So in China, there's 2 types of firewalls. So the first firewall in China you have is the actual firewall, where a Chinese internet user cannot use the likes of Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Pinterest, and all the apps go on. And then another firewall is a firewall of language. So most companies in China, employees in China, all of this content is in Chinese. And so through all of the conversations that I've had with entrepreneurs, founders, brands who's wanted to look at China as a market, I've definitely repeated a lot of these things. And so that's why I've written all of that in a book. But first off, as a test for this crowd to see your knowledge of e-commerce, I have some questions for the audience. So the first is, which was the world's first e-commerce platform? Does anyone know? How many people will do hands? How many people think it's eBay? Amazon? Oh, no Amazon? Alibaba? Several. Boston Computer Exchange? People know that company. And Bookstack. Yeah, the correct answer is Boston Computer Exchange. And the first item that was ever ordered online was actually a Led Zeppelin CD. What is the world's largest e-commerce platform by GMV? There's already some clues of number 1, number 2, number 3. How many think it's Alibaba? How many think it's eBay? Amazon? Most of the votes. Shopify? No votes at all. Zalando? Okay. Some of the other ones are a bit tinier. So, in terms of ranking for GMV, what we call in China Taobao or Tmall, that is the Amazon of China. And that currently is the world's largest e-commerce platform by GMV. The second of which is Amazon at about $575 billion. And the third is JD.com, which is another Chinese company. But if you look at a lot of the rankings for these platforms, you'll notice that truly a lot of the large e-commerce platforms do sit in China. So next one is, which has a larger GMV, Amazon or Shopify? People voting for Amazon and Shopify? Okay, that's like a half and half. So the correct answer here is Amazon. Amazon's about twice the size of Shopify, but Shopify is growing a lot because a lot of brands are also migrating, or a lot of brands are much more interested in selling and investing in their own .com websites versus on a marketplace. We'll notice later on in the presentation that this is actually the complete opposite phenomenon in China. Which country has the highest e-commerce penetration rate? Anyone think it's the US? UK? China? Japan? Korea? Sweden. Korea is actually, it ranks very high in e-commerce penetration rate, but China is the leader in terms of e-commerce penetration rate. Around 1 out of 2 transactions that happens in a retail environment in China happens online. So that means if you're a brand and you're not existent online, that means you're missing out a large portion of the potential of where your brand can be. Top e-commerce platforms by MAU. Anyone think it's Alibaba? eBay, Amazon, Shopify. So the largest MAU is China Core Commerce, once again. It has the world's largest set of online users, which is why the Chinese consumer market is the largest consumer market. The second of which is Pinduoduo, which is a company that was started in 2015. And it's also a very notable e-commerce company because of the speed that it has grown in recent years. And finally, what is the correct PC versus mobile ratio for e-commerce? So in the US, it's actually primarily 50-50 PC versus mobile, and then in China, it's actually 10% PC and 90% mobile. So e-commerce in China is a highly, highly mobile environment, and this is why we say that China leads the pack in the e-commerce industry, because a lot of the trends that happen in China, eventually the rest of the world adopts. So let's take a step back first in the birth of e-commerce. Everyone knows who this guy is, right? So this was taken in 1999. This guy is called Jack Ma. This was when he started Alibaba. The story goes, when Jack went to the west coast of the US on a trip, he typed in a search of German beer, and many different products and links showed up. And then he typed American beer, and also many things showed up. And then when he typed in Chinese beer, nothing showed up at all. And then when he typed in anything Chinese related, still nothing showed up. And what he realized then in that year is that China was not existent online at all. And so when he went back to China, that was how he started the first footsteps in getting China online. So the first product that he started was called Alibaba.com. And this is basically, or this served as a yellow pages of sorts for a lot of factories in China. It enabled a lot of overseas brands and buyers to discover Chinese manufacturing and Chinese factories to be able to supply, or further supply rather, and this is what caused a lot of the goods to be made in China to then be shipped to the rest of the world, is because of this product. Jack also is a very interesting person from a personal perspective. So when he had first started his business, and he will say this himself, is he failed many, many times. And he actually went into the entrepreneur world because he couldn't find a proper corporate job for himself. He originally wanted to be a policeman, and people told him that he was too short to be a policeman. He then wanted to apply to KFC to be a server. In his interview round, everyone got the job but him. And then he eventually found himself in the school of Zhejiang University, where he started teaching English. And this was where he picked from his class 18 of his students and started this company called Alibaba. So at the time when they started, they truly did not understand the internet. Many of his students were not even technical. And he basically paired himself with some of the people that actually knew software engineering in China at the time. But this eventually kicked off this entire e-commerce journey in China. So fast forward to what we are today. China now sits at about a quarter of the total world economy. And if you replace the word beer, so instead of global beer consumption, if you replace it with makeup or clothes, China will definitely reign at one of the biggest bubbles there is. So from many different perspectives, but definitely from a CPG or brand perspective, China is a very important and large market. So right now, as the world's second largest economy, its current retail sales are almost on par to the US. It also has a booming population, even though this population is currently somewhat declining. But still, if you are a company or a brand and you're looking to go to market in the US, consider China, because it can bring you perhaps equal or double or triple the amount of returns that you would otherwise. And a lot of this growth is attributed by this rising middle class in China. And this group of people we call the mass affluent. This group of people are earning at about 40,000 US dollars annually. And this is what's amounting to a lot of the growth that we have in China. Has anyone heard of Double 11 before? Raise of hands. Anyone heard of Black Friday before? A lot more. Okay, so this is also, I guess, something that's part of e-commerce culture or China internet culture that's slowly migrating to the rest of the world. So in the US, so the date is November 11th. In the US, if you're scrolling on Instagram, you'll start to see advertisements for Singles Day. This was invented in a college dorm in China in around the year of 2012. What happened was basically a lot of students realized that we have so many days to celebrate couples and love and marriages and anniversaries for that, but there's no day to celebrate single people. And so this group of people gathered together and said, we're going to take November 11th. So if you picture those numbers, it's 4 ones, right? It's 4 single digits. And that's when they started to, that's when this festival started to congregate. And then someone by the name of Daniel Zhang, which is the current Alibaba CEO today, he took that day and made it into a shopping festival that by now is the world's largest shopping festival. For a lot of brands that sell in China, about a third of their annual sales, e-commerce sales, will be accomplished in this day. Some photos from campus when I was there in 2019. So it's really become this festival of sorts. If you step into the Hangzhou campus around the Double 11 time, it looks like Christmas. There's lights everywhere, there's fireworks, there's usually hot air balloons, there's concerts. They usually invite a lot of celebrities also, and it's a big, huge party. A big, huge internet party. And the people that work in the company usually stay until midnight on November 10th. So when the clock strikes midnight and 11:11 actually hits, that's when a lot of the sales and discounts start to click in. And that's when we'll also have a lot of dashboards around campus, and that's when there's an immediate hockey stick increase that we see from the screens once 11:11 hits the clock. So some of the apps that you see on this page you might or might not know of, but for a company that's working in China or selling to Chinese consumers, these apps are pivotal in terms of digital marketing. The most famous one here you might have heard of maybe is called WeChat. WeChat is what we now know as a super app. So WeChat is the most used messaging app in China. And it also houses a function called WeChat Pay. So something also interesting in China is largely a cashless society. So very few people will use cash. Very few people also use credit cards. Most people will use their mobile phones to pay via QR codes, and WeChat Pay is the mechanism to enable that. Baidu is similar to a Google, so it's the Chinese search engine, and in the spirit and world of AI, Baidu is currently leading the AI race in China when it introduced its own version of ChatGPT called the Ernie bot. Taobao Tmall, we'll talk a lot about that later on. And Douyin is interesting because most people know this logo as TikTok, right? But the mother of TikTok is actually called Douyin. It's a entirely Chinese language app. You can also, it's what ByteDance did, which is the company that made it, is it separated China versus the rest of the world in that you can only download this app if you have a China-related Apple ID. So even if you are outside of China, you can still access this app and the content in the app, but just with another ID. And Tmall is what we call as the entry or gateway into selling to China. So very dissimilar to how shopping is done in America or Europe, where most brands will create a .com or a website. In China, if you want to reach a Chinese consumer, you don't create a website. If you do, it usually will list your office and the careers page. But what you do instead is you open a store, so a virtual store, on this platform called Tmall. Second to Tmall in terms of market share in China is called JD.com. And what JD did that was a huge differentiator to what Tmall is currently doing is it owns its own logistics. So this is actually a much similar model to Amazon FBA, if we've heard of that model before, where the bulk of the orders within JD is bought by someone at JD and then sold onto the platform, versus a marketplace play, which is more what Tmall does. So what you see flashing on the screen is a game. During these Double 11 sales, there's also mid-year sales. What the app will do is create a scavenger hunt within the app to invite the user to come back to the app and to make the app stickier. And so this is one of the very interesting types of marketing mechanisms to keep a user within the app. And this is also a very commonly used super app model where games is mixed in with shopping. So as I said, Pinduoduo is a very interesting company because it was very, very late into the game coming into China. By then, China Tmall and JD had already been the #1 and #2 in China for many, many years until Pinduoduo came along. Its founder is a Chinese guy who moved to the States during university, and then he went back to China, and then that's when he created Pinduoduo. The way that this app popularized itself is quite interesting in the format of social commerce. You might have heard of that term before, which is, so say this product is 83.14 kwai or RMB. If I bought it alone, that's my price. But if I send this link to 2 of my friends or more of my friends, I get a discount of maybe 1 to 2 RMB off or more, and they do as well. And then when they want to buy this product at a lower price, all they have to do is send this link to more of their friends. So in Chinese, we call this 砍价, which is to chop off the price or to shave off the price. And this was the route that Pinduoduo used to really popularize itself. It also saw this great opportunity to get into the lower tier cities. So in China, we have what we call a tier city mechanism. So the Shanghais, Beijings, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, those are the 4 largest cities in China. We call those tier 1 cities. And so what Pinduoduo did is saw an empty space where Tmall and JD was not as present. So it started to target a lot of the tier 3 and below cities. Something that is very unique to the Chinese e-commerce market is live streaming. So this woman's name is Via. She is China's most successful live streamer. She has about a 200 people team that sits behind her that helps her pick out products. And this is a demo of a type of live stream. It's very unique and different in that this now accounts for about 30% of total e-commerce sales in China, which means as a brand, if you're not live streaming and selling in this way, you're missing out on a lot of the potential or opportunity to capture a certain segment of your consumers.
这一件我明天一定要抢。我觉得黑灰色跟白色一定是大家首先去入的，一定要记得早一点来，赶紧来抢现货。明天8号。
So she's showing off her pants, right? So this is where we review the product. This is the product itself. And everything is very in-app. And this is a very unique way that China has grown its e-commerce footprint with its consumers because it's so interactive. And this is something that now Amazon is starting to imitate with Amazon Live. There's also a company called Firework. They also do embedded live stream shopping for .coms or websites. These are some other what we call KOLs or live streamers that are also very big in China. In this space as a brand, you almost, when you're about to plan for a Double 11 or a 618 mid-year sale, you almost absolutely need the placement of your product in one of these live streamers' live stream rooms. Otherwise, there's a huge chunk of sales that you're missing. And so from a Taobao perspective, what we've noticed is these live streamers now hold so much power in the e-commerce world. From shopping to entertainment, so in addition to just traditional, just for a brand to live stream. This live streaming phenomenon has also migrated to rural places. So before, the supply chain of fruits and vegetables, for example, was if you're a farmer, you farm your goods. It's then passed to a middleman or a distributor of sorts. The distributor then passes this to a supermarket. Supermarket then sells to the consumer, right? So, but when in the era of live streaming and what we're seeing a lot of these farmers in China doing is opening up their mobile phones, hitting start record, and they're talking to the camera and live streaming. And they bypass this entire ecosystem of middle people and going direct to consumer. In the AI world, obviously live streamers can only live stream for a certain hours of the day, but when you employ an AI bot to do this for you, they can continue this 24/7. This was a feature that was introduced to a lot of the brands in Tmall that upheld the live stream GMV. So why does live streaming work? From a very simple, the data aside, at the crux of it, at the heart of it, it's that we evolved from a consumer finding a product first via a product title, then we added product description, then we added photos, then we added reviews, then those photos became videos, and now the video is becoming the live stream. So as we mature in this, as we mature this product for the consumer, as the more interactive we're making it, the stickier this transaction is, the closer we're bringing this brand or product to the consumer. And so that is why live streaming is working in China, and how it's probably going to transform to the rest of the world. And why are, and some of these apps that use, oh, my time is up, but do I have more minutes or just wrap up? Okay. Went super overtime, very, I apologize. But there are some apps in China that's now growing to the rest of the world. And the reason for their success, or the reason why they're so successful at bringing the Chinese supply chain to the rest of the world, is because of mainly these three reasons. A lot of Chinese shopping apps are very multidisciplinary, so they recognize that our users need to shop, but at the same time, they need to be entertained. At the same time, maybe they need this app to also pay. At the same time, they want to see a live stream or play a game. And so the thicker this app becomes, the stickier this app is for the user. And so this is why an app like Taobao or Tmall has just become increasingly stickier and stickier to its users. These companies also recognize that we're in a different time right now. So we're possibly entering a global recession. And a lot of these apps that you see here know this very well. And so if you've seen the Shein ads or the Temu ads, you'll notice that these products are very cheap. These companies recognize that in the coming years, people don't want to stop shopping just because we have less money. Spending is still going to happen, but what's going to happen is there's going to be a downgrade in shopping. We might not continue to buy the same luxury or premium brands as before, but we still want to buy things. And so this is one of the top tactics that these companies are using to ship these apps to the rest of the world. And the final thing is personalization. So prior to being in China, I was in the US and experiencing shopping on both sides. And the personalization aspect of a Chinese shopping app is very, very mature. So much so that if I'm opening this app at a different time of day or a different location, what this app is showing me is will change, or the tools that's given to these brands on these marketplaces will enable the brands to change according to this customer, time of day, and location that this customer is interacting with the app. So that's all I have time for today, but I'll just go to the end. This is my LinkedIn. I'm happy to share more with other people or more people who are interested in China and looking at China as a market. I'll also be giving out a discount for a lot of the Techsylvania attendees for the book. So if you're interested, add me on LinkedIn and let me know. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Indeed, China is fascinating.